I have chosen to leave my family and I am comfortable with this decision. I am currently situated in my RV outside a cafe with complimentary internet access, typing this text. I have contemplated this decision extensively, but I believe that articulating it in writing could assist me in articulating my thoughts more clearly. I left my family a little over a week after D-Day, when my wife was 36 years old and I was 37, and our daughter was 13. It is now almost 6 months since that day. I discovered my wife's affair by chance. I was unaware of the true state of our marriage. I believed we had a good marriage, plenty of intimacy, and that we would talk about things for hours. We had regular date nights and shared individual hobbies. We were healthy and in fairly good shape. However, I now realize that my perception of our marriage may have been inaccurate. My wife, whom I will refer to as Eve, had an affair. This led me to believe that she preferred another man to me. If she could betray me like that, I thought, she couldn't possibly love me. This was a flawed assumption on my part. My best friend, I suppose. In retrospect, however, I recognize that I likely viewed things through a biased lens. I genuinely believed that my family cared about me and that I was loved. I was, in fact, the one who was misguided. I returned home late from work, only to discover that I had to attend a safety training seminar. My wife was asleep on the sofa, and a message with emojis appeared on her phone. The emojis were similar to those I would use when messaging her. I immediately began to investigate. I discovered that the affair had been ongoing for at least 5 months. The AP, whom I will refer to as Adam, was a colleague of hers. I had even attended a barbecue at his house and met his family. Adam was married with 3 children, the youngest of whom was only 2 years old. As I read the messages, I experienced a sudden and profound shift in my perspective. My feelings towards Eve underwent a significant transformation. I experienced a range of intense emotions, from intense hatred to a complete absence of emotion. I took photographs of the messages and retired to bed, where I remained awake. I did not sleep at all but instead stared at the ceiling. The following day, Eve expressed displeasure at my decision to go to bed without waking her. She also complained of neck pain caused by sleeping on the couch all night. However, I was not fully attentive to her concerns. Instead, I recall a sense of everything being muffled, as if someone had turned down the volume on the world. I was somewhat surprised at the extent of my emotional numbness. I felt practically nothing, and I should have been angry at breakfast. However, I remained silent, and my wife and daughter chatted away, seemingly unaware of my altered state. I did not feel like myself. I felt like I was someone new, someone I did not know or understand, wearing a suit of the old me. I completed all the daily tasks, including my work obligations. However, I noticed a significant change in my interactions with others. It seemed as if I was no longer a part of their lives. I came to the realization that my wife and daughter did not seem to acknowledge my presence. I began to understand that they did not truly love me. I was physically present in the house, but they did not interact with me unless they needed something from me. They spoke to me, but not with me. I experienced intermittent episodes of intense discomfort, which would occasionally reach a level of complete overwhelm. I was unable to function normally. This state persisted for 5 days until Eve inquired about my well-being during dinner. During that period, I had only spoken 3 words to her and my daughter. I did not respond to her question but instead made a "don't know" gesture and continued eating. She seemed to accept this response. The following day, I did not go. I was gainfully employed by the local power company, where I was responsible for maintaining and repairing power lines. In addition to my regular work attire, I also packed a few items of camping and SL hunting gear. I had not formulated a concrete plan. Instead, I simply loaded my belongings into my vehicle and spent some time exploring the surrounding area. Eventually, I found myself at the kitchen table, awaiting the return of my spouse. She arrived with a few bags of groceries and immediately began discussing the events of her day while unpacking. I remained seated at the kitchen table. My wife did not acknowledge me, nor did she look at me as she entered the kitchen. My daughter did the same. They did not acknowledge me, and they did not acknowledge each other. They were preoccupied with inconsequential matters and did not acknowledge my presence. I felt isolated and invisible. I felt that they did not care about me or my needs. I was reflecting on our lives together, and I realized that they had not cared about me at all. I was of no consequence to them. I was merely an accessory to their lives. I was a convenient and useful prop. I was struck by a wave of pain. I wept, but they did not notice. I became enraged. I had a glass of water in front of me. I stood up and threw it hard at the tiles over the sink. It merely exploded, sending shards of glass raining over everything. They both turned around, angry. What on earth were they thinking? I was unsure what to do when they saw my contorted, tear-soaked face. There was an uncomfortably quiet period of time before I spoke. Eve, I am aware of your infidelity with Adam. I was surprised at how clear my voice was, given that I was clenching my jaw so hard it was causing me discomfort. My daughter looked at Eve and asked, "What is that, Mom?" Eve began to try to explain. She briefly glanced at T and said, "I'm sorry. I can explain." Then she turned back to our daughter. The argument resumed. I was rendered invisible. I departed the premises after a few minutes and entered my vehicle. I observed the couple through the window. They were still engaged in a heated discussion in the kitchen. They were unaware that I had left. I lingered for a few more minutes before departing. It took approximately 15 minutes before they attempted to contact me. Subsequently, there were numerous calls and a plethora of texts from both parties. I chose to disregard these communications and eventually deactivated the phone. The following day, I withdrew a portion of our funds and contacted my superior. I informed him that I was uncertain as to when I would resume my duties. He advised me that if I did not return, I would be terminated from my position. I simply replied with an affirmation and terminated the call. I was indifferent to the consequences. I proceeded to Adam's residence, where his spouse greeted me. I provided her with a copy of the messages and detailed the circumstances surrounding my relationship with Adam. My wife had been up to something, and I left her crying on the stairs at the end of the day. I ended up in a modest hotel at the edge of town. The following days were somewhat indistinct, as I attempted to come to terms with the situation. I did not make significant progress, spending the majority of my time staring at the wall, attempting to identify reasons not to end my life. Eve's older brother is a police officer, whom I will refer to as Bob. Bob arrived on the third or fourth day, though the precise date is unclear to me. He located me and attempted to question me. I remained silent when I did not engage. He informed me that I was under arrest and placed me in handcuffs. However, he did not take me to the station as I had anticipated. Instead, he transported me to my residence. Upon arrival, my wife and daughter immediately began to berate me. Nevertheless, I remained silent, merely listening in astonishment as they conveyed to me the extent of their distress. I was aware that my actions were causing them concern. This continued for some time until I was finally asked to speak. I remained silent for a few moments before calmly stating that I had nothing to say to them. My sister-in-law became visibly distressed and began shouting at me, demanding that I stop speaking to her in such a way. I derived a great deal of satisfaction from her violent reaction. I am unsure why I felt so happy about it. It was as though I was laughing at my own misfortune. My sister-in-law then left the room. For months prior, I had smiled at Bob, who was a pitiful figure. "Did you beat your wife?" I asked. "Is that why she left you?" Bob struck me with a powerful blow, and I fell to the ground. My wife and daughter began screaming at the top of their lungs as I attempted to rise. I could not stop laughing, even though I was bleeding from an unknown source. I observed the blood on the floor and remained in handcuffs, laughing uncontrollably. Perhaps it was the sheer absurdity of the situation that prompted me to spit out blood. I informed Bob that he had struck me with sufficient force to render me unconscious. Upon regaining consciousness, I was admitted to the hospital with a concussion. My wife and daughter were present, and they informed me that Bob had been present during my collapse. I was too disoriented to communicate effectively, and a nurse arrived to request that my family leave the room. She provided me with a receptacle to vomit into and requested that a cleaning staff member attend to it. She was taking my pulse. I informed her that my family had placed me in this situation and that they were not to approach me. I stated that if they returned to the room, I would leave the premises. I would simply flee. She countered with a degree of assertiveness, arguing that attempting to run or even get up was a highly inadvisable course of action for me. However, she would speak with the security personnel. I did not see her again in the hospital. Finally, I felt a sense of tranquility. I was able to think clearly. I contemplated reporting Bob to have him dismissed from his position, but the town is small, and his colleagues would likely shield him from any consequences. I considered confronting my wife, but that did not seem a viable option. I chose to remove myself from the situation, to become a non-entity. I wanted nothing more than to be free of these people. I wrote letters to each of them, informing them of my decision and warning Bob that if he ever bothered me again, I would report him. I informed my daughter that Eve had betrayed me and that she would be without a father from now on. I drafted a longer letter and attempted to be as practical as possible. I advised her to sell the house, as I would no longer be responsible for the mortgage or utilities. I also informed her that reconciliation or even contact was unfeasible, particularly given her actions in sending her brother to persuade me to reconcile and subsequently assaulting me in front of them. I informed her that I would not provide her with any further assistance and that if she wished to proceed with a divorce, she would have to arrange the necessary arrangements independently. I stated that I would cease all contact and that I did not wish to be found. Furthermore, I made it clear that if she attempted to interfere with my life again, I would be forced to end my own life. I also made it known that I would never speak to her again. I then proceeded to enumerate the ways in which she had hurt me. I subsequently reflected on the sentence I had uttered and regretted its impact. It felt as though I had allowed her to inflict a small but significant wound. I allowed her to inflict further pain upon me in the hospital. I devised a plan to facilitate my disappearance. Eve provided the hospital with some fresh clothes, which they forwarded to me. One evening, I exited the premises via the rear fire escape. This triggered an alarm, which prompted a certain degree of panic. However, I was ultimately able to evade detection. I was not impeded in my departure. I proceeded to the hotel to retrieve my vehicle, which I exchanged for a compact recreational vehicle and subsequently departed. I obtained a new telephone number and contacted only my father. I informed him of the circumstances and stated that if he divulged my new contact information, I would become entirely inaccessible. He could contact me if necessary. To facilitate communication should I require to sign any documents that fall outside of the aforementioned parameters, would prefer to be left undisturbed for the first few months. I lament the loss of my former life, but I have come to understand that I am grieving the loss of a fantasy, a memory that existed solely in my imagination. I am grieving the loss of the role of a loving wife and daughter, and the memories of family and friends that I had created in my mind. These individuals never truly demonstrated any genuine care or concern for me. Over time, I began to reconstruct a semblance of a life for myself, albeit one that was largely devoid of social interaction. I effectively became a non-entity in the eyes of society, and now maintain only a P.O. box as a point of contact. I rent a safety deposit box for the storage of valuables, engage in odd jobs for monetary compensation, and engage in hunting, fishing, and scavenging activities. My expenditure of capital is negligible, resulting in a net accumulation of financial assets. I am not liable for taxation, nor do I maintain a conventional bank account. When queried about my identity, I respond that my name is Fred. However, this is not my legal name. I deliberately avoid any form of contribution to society or other entities. I remain effectively invisible. I was previously integrated into my family, but now I am invisible to strangers. Those who claim to love me are no longer a part of my life. I must admit that I am content with this new state of affairs. I brew my own beer, I move around, I have no obligations, I work when I want, I spend a lot of time in nature just relaxing, and I have a few friends that I hunt and fish with. I am in optimal physical condition, arguably the best I have ever been. Overall, my quality of life is improving. I no longer find myself being exploited by others for their own benefit while they feign concern for my well-being. I am uncertain about the circumstances surrounding my wife, daughter, former friends, and the rest of my family. I am unaware of whether I am divorced or if I am obliged to provide child support. I am similarly uninformed about the whereabouts of the family home. My father has attempted on a few occasions to provide me with information, but I have declined to accept it. He is the only person I speak to occasionally about my former life. I feel free, relaxed, and content. I would even go so far as to say that I am happy. Despite my limited material possessions, I am content with what I have. When I reach the end of my life, I will sell my remaining belongings and burn the rest of my money. I will ensure that nothing of value remains, leaving no tangible reminders of my existence. I will then walk into a national park, without anyone ever knowing, and disappear forever. On occasion, I visit shopping malls, train stations, and bus stations, where I observe the people around me. I see men who, like I once was, are sacrificing themselves for a society and families that do not value them. These men work themselves to exhaustion without recognition or the subject's expressed gratitude to others, yet they themselves were guilt-tripped, pressured, and pushed to make more sacrifices. They were encouraged to consume more, to purchase more expensive clothes and bigger houses, and to accumulate more material possessions. However, they never received any form of gratitude or appreciation in return. They attempted to fool themselves, just as I had done in the past, by refusing to recognize reality. However, I could see their emptiness, just as I had seen it in myself. They had the same empty stare that I had once had. It felt good to get it off my chest. Thank you for listening. Mini update: I have abandoned my family, and I am okay with it. I would like to express my gratitude to all those who provided feedback and comments. Due to the sheer volume of responses, it has not been possible for me to respond individually to each one. The majority of the comments and criticism were justified, but I was unable to read them all, as I was already experiencing a similar sensation to that which I felt on the day I attempted to confront Eve. In short, I was not feeling well and felt the need to log off. I contacted a hunting friend and requested his assistance in coming to my location. We conversed on the phone until he arrived. Upon his arrival, he confiscated all my ammunition, indicating his concern for my well-being. He then contacted my father and remained with me until his arrival. I relocated to a different city, which took over 4 hours. We engaged in a discussion about the distressing comments I had encountered. However, I do not recall the specifics of the conversation. The details of the incident are somewhat convoluted, but essentially, my father arrived and took me to see a doctor. As a result, I have been committed to a psychiatric facility. The doctor's assessment indicates that I may be suffering from emotional and psychological trauma, which may also be indicative of depression. Additionally, the numbness and extreme desire for self-isolation are concerning behaviors. The doctor identified several unusual behaviors as potential indicators of underlying issues, including laughing at being beaten, feelings of isolation, and a lack of self-worth. These observations align with the criteria for various mental health conditions, but further diagnostic assessments are necessary to confirm a specific diagnosis. It is unclear what the next steps will be or whether there are any immediate interventions that can be taken. However, there is a possibility of discussing the situation with my daughter in the near future, provided that the counselors deem it appropriate and she is willing to participate. My father has discussed the situation with my daughter to some extent. He has informed me that she loves me and requests my presence. I believe that many of you are correct in your assumptions. My father is currently with me, and I will be monitored continuously for the next few days. They attempted to administer medication, but I had a severe adverse reaction, so they will try a different approach tomorrow. Bob somehow located the post and contacted me to express his apologies. Eve had not informed him of the true reason for my absence. She departed for the hotel, having just informed him of the glass in the wall. According to Bob, he informed his superiors of his actions when he discovered them. He asserts that all relevant parties have been informed, and he was suspended to undergo anger management training. He has prepared a comprehensive written confession and all the necessary documentation for me to submit if I choose to do so. Accordingly, my sole remaining option is to post on Reddit. If I consent to sign the document, I will be permitted to continue my work, albeit with a reduction in remuneration and a demotion. However, I am uncertain as to the optimal course of action. I believe that I should initially focus on my own well-being. I am currently experiencing a sense of emotional distress and a lack of direction, and I must address these issues before I can make any decisions. To be frank, I felt compelled to provide an update to express my gratitude to everyone who has provided me with assistance. I sought assistance, and I will provide an update in the future. I am grateful for your support. Update 2, I have separated from my family, and I am at peace with this decision. This is a positive development. Thank you to everyone who has reached out. I apologize for not responding to all of you, there have been too many messages for me to address individually. I have tried to do so, but I have had limited access over the last week. The hospital removed my internet access because some of the comments I read caused me considerable distress. In any case, I have been out since Friday morning. I have been undergoing a great deal of therapy and I am now much better. I have daily treatment, but I no longer require hospitalization. I am suffering from the after effects of emotional trauma and have mild PTSD. My behavior has been somewhat erratic as a result of this. I have been undergoing intensive therapy and I currently take medication on an as-needed basis. When I feel overwhelmed, I still experience these waves of pain that make the world seem numb, but they occur less frequently. Some of my behavior, particularly the isolation, may have exacerbated the situation. I have discussed the matter extensively with my daughter. She has informed me that she has forgiven me and that she never intended to make me feel unappreciated. She has also expressed her love for me. Initially, I did not believe her. I initially believed her, but upon gaining perspective, I realized that this doubt was self-induced. I have apologized numerous times. She advised me to cease apologizing, and in fact, she has relocated from her mother's residence to live with my brother and his family. She has a positive relationship with his children. My brother has informed us that she is welcome to stay for as long as she desires. I am currently unable to fulfill the role of a full-time parent. Currently, she is the primary caregiver, so she will remain with him for the time being. My brother has arranged therapy for her, and I will strive to become the most effective father I can be from this point forward. My wife, Eve, has also relocated from the family home and is residing with her parents. My father has been paying the mortgage on the property without my knowledge, so the sale has not yet been completed. I am not eager to return to the house, given the memories it evokes. I have decided to sell the house and downsize to a smaller residence. I aspire to live a life closer to nature with less stress. I intend to rent or purchase a plot of land and adopt a minimalist lifestyle, at least for a period of time. My daughter is enthusiastic about this idea and has been conducting extensive research on tiny homes. Adam, the app, is attempting to reconcile with his wife and has severed communication with Eve. Eve has been visiting my father's house almost weekly, imploring him to contact me and facilitate a conversation. Based on what she has told me, it seems that Eve has lost her job and is facing significant challenges. She is barely leaving her room at her parents' house and is shunned by pretty much everyone, according to her mother. I have found a lawyer today and will start divorce proceedings ASAP. I purchased a case of my hunting buddy's favorite whiskey and spent Saturday night there thanking him. He is a true friend, he probably saved my life. My wife's affair completely broke me and my family. I was so broken I couldn't even see it myself. It was actually all the harsh comments. On Reddit, I was forced to confront the reality that I was in a situation that required external assistance. Prior to this, I had been attempting to cope with the situation by convincing myself that I was coping better than I was. However, the truth was that I was merely holding myself together by a thread. Therefore, I would like to express my gratitude to everyone who has provided support. Edit, I forgot to mention. I contacted Bob's employer today and concluded Bob's case, which resulted in Bob's continued employment as a police officer. Bob visited me on Thursday and had prepared all the necessary paperwork for me to file a formal complaint against him. He did not offer any excuses and admitted that his behavior was completely inappropriate. He expressed remorse for losing his composure and acknowledged that it was entirely his fault. He encouraged me to file the complaint. I have considered his actions, and I have observed him intervening to protect an elderly woman who was being attacked. I am acquainted with numerous individuals who have worked with him, and they consistently remark upon his willingness to go above and beyond to assist others. I have also learned the reason behind his divorce. Despite his limited financial resources, Bob donates 10% of his income and volunteers 3 days a week to support others. The homeless, apparently, was the cause of his ex-wife's decision to divorce him. Despite this, Bob refused to cease his charitable work, which ultimately led to their separation. He is a kind-hearted individual who, on one occasion, lost his temper and acted inappropriately. I, too, experienced a period of personal turmoil, lasting over half a year. I am pleased to put up with physical abuse in order to ensure that a man like him can continue to do good in the world. He accompanied me to visit the homeless individuals he helps today, after I requested it. It is crucial for him to maintain his current course of action. Monthly update: I have chosen to disengage from my family, and I am at peace with this decision. I am grateful for the continued support I have received via PM from this community. Your encouragement is invaluable. I have engaged in extensive therapy and have achieved a degree of stability. My daughter is thriving, but I have undergone significant personal changes. I find it challenging to trust others, except for my daughter. I prefer solitude and have a minimal public profile. I am uncertain if I would describe my internal state as broken. I would say that I am broken compared to who I was before, but I am not unhappy. I am functioning well overall. I am currently a partial loner. I believe that I am now a different person. I have purchased a tiny home in which to live with my daughter. It is not a tiny home as depicted on television. It has 2 separate bedrooms and a combined living room and kitchen. It is situated in a secluded location on a forested hillside and has a porch as large as the house and a wonderful view. I am extremely fond of the tranquility and the close proximity to nature in our new home. I am divorced or almost divorced, and the formalities are expected to be completed within 3 months. My former spouse has been. She requests a second chance on a near-daily basis, yet she has not demanded anything from me. She attempts to excuse herself from the situation. She acknowledges her role in the affair. We employed mediation, and she has provided me with everything, including all of our assets and full custody. The only request she has made is to be permitted to visit frequently in order to attempt to repair her relationship with our daughter. She has also offered to perform domestic tasks, such as cooking and cleaning. However, I am reluctant to feel indebted to her. I intend to maintain the functionality of the household, which is already minimal, and I require assistance with household tasks for my daughter. It is my intention to ensure that my daughter does not become a spoiled individual. The relationship between my daughter and her former spouse is currently experiencing significant difficulties. It will be necessary to observe the situation and determine the best course of action. Those who believe that my daughter's actions are a ploy to attempt to reconcile with me may be mistaken. She has been transparent and forthcoming about her intentions. She has indicated her desire to reconcile and has committed to making efforts to facilitate that outcome, contingent on my establishment of boundaries. She has agreed to respect those boundaries, which is a positive development from my perspective. I have informed her that I seek closure but recognize that our relationship is irremediable. Our future will be characterized by a co-parenting dynamic. I have insisted on split custody since it would be impractical to undo full custody after the divorce is final. Now that I have had time to reflect, I believe it is in our daughter's best interest to have a relationship with her mother. I have forgiven her and moved on. I will live my life as I see fit from here on out. Regarding the assets, I will give her half at the last minute. Following the dissolution of the marriage, the couple had accumulated sufficient resources to warrant a 50-50th split. However, the wife's willingness to do so remains uncertain. Despite her remorse, the wife's actions have not yet reflected a commitment to this arrangement. The husband's decision to seek counseling is indicative of his ongoing emotional distress. The wife's engagement in counseling is also a positive step. In order to make amends for my actions, I am committed to engaging in family therapy for the benefit of my daughter. Despite the challenges, I am determined to demonstrate resilience and strive for positive outcomes. My daughter is perceptive and has likely forgiven me, but she is still cautious in her interactions with her mother. I am committed to being a positive role model and will strive to maintain exemplary conduct. I was misguided in posting on Reddit. I am unsure of my motivation for doing so. However, I received feedback that was instrumental in helping me gain perspective. It has been challenging to navigate the aftermath, but I am beginning to stabilize. Despite the destruction of our family and marriage, I am optimistic that we will emerge unscathed. I am grateful for your support.